love to turn it over to our presenters to briefly introduce themselves, as well as provide a brief introduction to their institution before we begin with the questions. We can start with alpha order, so if Ben from GW, if you don't mind kicking us off.
Sure, and welcome everybody, and good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are. My name is Ben Toll. I'm the Dean of Admissions at the George Washington University. We are located just about 4 blocks northwest of the White House in Washington, D.C., and happy to have a student body of about 10,000 or so undergraduates studying a broad range of majors from the arts and sciences to engineering, business, international affairs, journalism, and public health. As we look forward to this semester, we know that all of us are doing our work differently, and we're connecting with you in different ways, and hopefully this can be a part of that conversation to make sure that you're best equipped to move forward and to work with students that you're counseling, whether that's in person in your office or whether you're doing it via mechanisms like this in Zoom and WebEx and all the fun virtual lands we live in these days.
Great. Liz from Northeastern.
Hi, everyone. My name is Liz Sharon. I serve as Assistant Vice President and Dean of Admissions at Northeastern. And Northeastern, if you're not already familiar, is a large urban research university in the heart of Boston. We are probably most well known for our focus on experiential education, so the integration of opportunities like co-op, global experiences, research, as well as service learning into our academic programs, of which there's over 220. And I'm thrilled to be with you this evening and happy to answer all of your questions.
Thank you. Amanda?
Hi, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be here this evening for me. I know many different time zones are here today. I am representing the beautiful University of Miami. Again, it is my pleasure to be meeting with you all. We're located in Coral Gables, Florida, just directly south of Miami itself. We have just about 10,000 total undergraduate students, 180 programs and majors. And just like Liz, we boast a lot of experiential learning, learning by doing, of course, research opportunities as well as internships. Our students also participate in something called the Cognates program. So they really are building their own academic experience through kind of building their own general education curriculum. Just acknowledging the fact that all of you are, I'm sure, experiencing one of the weirdest recruitment cycles ever, and counseling cycles. We really are here just to demystify this all, because I know, again, it's weird, and I wish I was with you all in person. So it's a pleasure to meet you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Elena Hicks, and I am the Dean of Admission at SMU, which is in Dallas, Texas. SMU is a mid-sized, hands-on research university where there's lots of opportunities for students just to dig in. We're known for our leadership development, our strong foundation in the humanities and sciences, and we're also known for being very supportive of students doing interdisciplinary majors as well as multiple majors in regard to their careers and what they want to do ultimately. So we like pulling their interests together and creating what they want in that regard. I am happy to be with you today. This not only was a way to spend some time with you, but to see people I haven't seen in a long time in regard to the panelists. So thank you.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Satya Dadagupta, Dean of Admission, VP of Enrollment at Tulane University. Apologies for the technical issues that you had. I just wanted to address that right off the bat instead of pretending that that didn't happen. We already have more than 125 people logged in, so welcome this evening. Tulane is an institution, for those of you that don't know, are located in New Orleans, Louisiana, 7,500 undergraduate students, over 75 different areas of study. And, I'm just excited to be here today to answer questions, hopefully dispel some myths, and just work with my colleagues in answering any questions that can make life just that little bit easier for you. This has been a difficult year for all of us. And the goal today is that at the end of this, that you leave feeling a little more informed about the process, about the changes and how each of us are dealing with it, so you can help your students. Ultimately, that's what it's about, is about our students. So we hope to provide that for you. And again, welcome all of you this evening, and I'm really glad we're able to do this today.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. And again, we appreciate all of your time tonight as well. So to start us off with one of the major questions and ongoing issues that we're all experiencing right now, but if you could please describe to the counseling community the impact the viral pandemic has had on your respective campuses. What actions did your university take to support students, and how have efforts to reopen this fall gone thus far? And we can go in maybe reverse alpha order, or whichever institution wants to jump in first, but we'll hear from everyone.
I'm happy to start. So let's talk about it. I mean, this is kind of the hot button topic this evening, right? If I was logging in as a counselor, I'd be like, this is the good stuff. I mean, it's been truly the biggest learning experience, I think, for every single one of us. Whether you're a counselor, you are a student, you are in admission, you're a faculty member. It's been every day we're learning something new. As a result of this pandemic, specifically at UM, we've done a lot of things, as I know my colleagues have. The biggest, I think, takeaway from this is we, on the admission side, do not want to by any means penalize these wonderful humans, our beautiful students that we do this all for things that are outside of their control. So a lot of us have shifted to test optional, if not just for this year, then moving forward. UM is, at least for fall 2021 right now, we are test optional as a direct result of said global pandemic. We've been, and I have to say, I do think it's because the students take so much pride in being on campus. They are back, and my goodness, they're taking it seriously. So they've got their little UM masks on and they show up, and I think they're smiling under there. I don't know. But it's been beautiful to watch them take it very seriously, as well as our faculty and staff have been doing the same thing. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all just trying to bend and shift and to ensure that these students are supported, and probably the biggest thing here, that they're safe, as well as our faculty and staff are safe.
Thanks for leading us off, Amanda. At Northeastern, we certainly have spent the last, what feels like a million months, but probably is actually only 4, really with our nose to the grindstone, preparing to reopen campus. And now we're 1 week into classes and about 3 weeks into campus being fully reopened. We did sort of a soft reopening over the course of July and August. And our approach has really been one where we're focused on the long game, that we know that we want to be open this fall with students being able to attend class in person, and have made the necessary adjustments to do so. So a few things that we have put into play that have been especially successful in being able to engage our student population. One is a very, very robust testing protocol for our students, faculty, and staff. I will say that I feel like I am now an absolute pro at the anterior nasal swab on campus. And it's actually quite convenient to be able to have such easy access to testing, but we're in a position where, as a university community, we have set up our own lab space on campus and are running students, faculty, staff, vendors, et cetera, through a very robust testing protocol where students are being tested multiple times every week. Faculty and staff are being tested either multiple times a week or every single day that we're in. We're going through 7,000 plus tests a day and still have a positivity rate that's below the state of Massachusetts. So we're thrilled to be in such a positive position that way as we start the semester. At the same time, there were plenty of preparations that went into account prior to reopening. So 2 populations in particular that we really needed to focus on were our NUN students, who typically would be at one of maybe 10 different locations across the globe for the fall semester. Obviously, that was not going to be a fit this year. So in just a matter of weeks, we, over the course of the spring, created the NUN Boston program, which is a global flavor in a domestic location where we have over 800 first-year students who are participating in NUN Boston. In addition to that, probably many of you are familiar with the fact that we have a very global and international student population at Northeastern. So realizing that there are going to be mobility challenges globally, whether it be visa appointments or the purchasing of airline tickets or just general anxiety about being that far from home, we also, in addition to our hybrid class model that all of our students have access to, we created a fully online first year program called NU Start for our students who either were not able to travel to campus in Boston or for students who felt more comfortable staying at home for that first semester. So we have just shy of 20% of our first year class, both international students as well as students from in the US who are participating in NU Start and will participate in an asynchronous program during the fall semester fully online. And then the majority of our student population is back in person in Boston, and we're thrilled to have them repopulating campus.
So I'll jump in because we're a little bit different at GW. So like UM and Northeastern, we spent the summer trying to reinvent our college campus. But like us and the other area DC institutions, we chose to have a much more conservative posture for the fall semester. And so while we traditionally have 10,000 undergraduates on campus, as of today, we have right around 500 students on campus. And so when we were making those choices, we prioritized students, perhaps who had food insecurity concerns or housing security concerns, seniors wrapping up capstone projects. So there was kind of a selection criteria by which students would be offered housing. And so the wide majority of GW students are doing their campus from home. So we have locations all across the globe right now. And the students on campus, are similarly going through testing protocol. Those of us as staff, quite honestly, most of my colleagues in the admissions office currently aren't welcome on campus because we're taking the safety of those students quite seriously. And so there's only a limited number of staff who are in the testing pool and therefore have access to campus. And so therefore, the admissions office, we've been doing this since the end of March, and we will continue doing it at least to the end of the fall semester. And I do believe, for the spring semester, while we might have a slightly larger campus population, we will not be at a full-blown 10,000 student on-campus residential population. And so again, each institution is trying to make the right decision for its students, for its experience, and balancing different things out. And there are real effects of any of these decisions. And I think you see that in the minds and the words of campus leaders as they talk about the decisions they make going forward.
I would love to echo what Ben just said, because being very different institutions, decisions are made at a higher level for our constituents and for our faculty and staff. And no matter what the decision is that we differ in it, I think that it does support who we are and our mission. There are lots of things going on at SMU that are similar to what my colleagues have talked about. We are on campus. The staff came back on June 1. Small group of us were back in the office, and then we started classes. We are high flex for students to be able to be either in class on the day they're supposed to be or online and pre-recorded. So all those things are in place. We are not testing everyone several times a week. We have an app that we log into each morning, and we click what symptoms we might have or don't have. And then if you're okay that day in regard to how you feel, you get the big green check. And otherwise, even if it's something small, they ask you to go in, and we have rapid tests at SMU that folks can take on campus. So it's been a very interesting and almost surreal kind of experience, but we are learning and living together quite well, and also pivoting on a dime when things change and we need to be a little bit more nimble.
Yeah, so at Tulane, and again, I completely agree with what Ben said about the fact that every institution makes their own decision for themselves. And there's no right or wrong answer here. I have the privilege of sitting on the president's cabinet, and I can tell you that this was a very difficult decision to make because there was no one right answer. We're making decisions about opening based on data that we had in July, but what will happen in terms of opening the semester in August. We did, however, decide to open. And we found that when our students came, we had a welcome center. We were very blessed that we have our own School of Medicine who we partnered with. And when students came in, we had a 0.35% positivity rate that actually went up to 4.5% and is back down to 0.6%. We're testing every student twice a week, very fortunate to be able to do so. Students that, and again, this is about ultimately about keeping our students safe, our faculty safe. We are hybrid, a very challenging semester, but in talking to my students, all I can tell you is that they are so grateful that they can be here, and so the one thing that we all maybe discounted was the ability of 20-year-olds to control themselves. And so far, for the most part, it has been successful. And again, this, again, like Amanda, agree with you, the time will tell. As far as the office admissions, we were actually one of the few schools that decided to do small tours starting in May. So we've been doing that, and we cap our tours at 12 people and everything that everyone else said. But so far, so good. We'll see where life takes us beyond today.
It's an excellent sentiment to end on, certainly. So shifting gears and focus to certainly the other national ongoing conversation and racial pandemic that far preceded COVID-19, but curious to hear from all of you how the response to the Black Lives Matter movement has taken shape on your campuses, and what changes, if anything, are being made to your institutions. What have they committed to as a result of it? Any feedback you could provide would be great.
Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to start. I mean, this was a very interesting time because this was happening at the same time that our campuses were operating in this virtual environment. And I think one of the things that was the most hopeful parts of this is seeing the campus community come together across June and July for conversation at a time that in a normal year, I don't think you would have had perhaps the level of participation of faculty, of staff, of students who sometimes, they're taking that summer and they're not thinking about university. And our team here at GW did an amazing job putting together a multi-week series of conversations, right? And some of it was presentation, but much of it was conversation just to foster a community. And even within the admissions office, right, we just started by just looking after each other and looking after our student workers. For us, Lafayette Park is, again, as I said at the beginning, 4 blocks away. It's part of my daily commute, whether on foot or on bike, every day I go through that park, and that's what people see in the news. I will also, I would say at GW, we're in a little bit of a hiccup right now on this topic. I mean, as you've probably all seen the news, having a professor in your history department come out as, admitting that they've been claiming an identity that wasn't their own, there is very much a sense of betrayal within GW as people have reacted to that. And I think we have more conversations to have as a result of that. And so what I'm hopeful for is I saw our community come together across June and July. I know that there are tough conversations that are happening again right now as we react to this a little bit of a surprise, and I think our students are approaching that conversation, that dialogue, in a way to be able to move forward and to be able to just regain trust, because it's when someone you look up to is the one who comes out with that surprise on you, it resets everything, and there's work to be done for us as a community as a result of that.
Elena, where are you going to go?
Sure. So for SMU, things kind of started in 2016 when we created CIQ, which is Cultural Intelligence. And so with cultural intelligence, it was implemented in 2017. To explain it briefly, you take the first round of modules are about African-American folks, Latinx folks, Asian people, and then Anglo people. And our students had modules to learn more about each other, which is extremely helpful. We also went through a bias training as well. The admission office did that, and it's our own homegrown kind of bias training, a little bit different than going out to a company, but that was all extremely helpful. When things began to happen in regard to Black Lives Matter, our president spoke out and said that Black Lives Matter and we are going to be a part of the solution. So the professor who created the CIQ for us was just named our chief diversity officer. She will have an university ombudsman that will be reporting to her. There are also, I hear, I was in a Zoom a couple of days ago, that there are going to be some other appointments that have not been made just yet that will be helpful. The other thing is that right after the protests started, our president decided that he wanted to have Zooms with, like a Zoom with as many Black students that could get into that town hall, another one with Black faculty, another one with Black staff. And I was lucky enough to be a part of that and be able just to listen. And now I'm involved in yet another group that's been created called BUFF, which is a Black Unity Forum. So those groups I mentioned, Black faculty, Black staff, Black students, now have a smaller group of about 10 people that have made requests of the university that are being looked at now. And I hear most will come through and work out. So I'm very proud of SMU. We have a lot of work to do, but we're willing to do the work. Last thing is, in this freshman class, we moved to 31% students of color versus 25% at this time last year. So lots of things, lots of good things going on. Once again, more work to do.
Yes, at Tulane, it was unfortunately, it took the life of a person dying in a way that they should never have. For a lot of us to actually put in place, even though we've had we have a lot, I believe, in terms of support services and initiatives, but I think this was a pivotal moment for Tulane and my office and myself, in understanding the difference between, as a non-Black person, the difference between not being a racist and being an anti-racist. And my team is going through, for the first time, an anti-racism training, and we're going to be instituting that across the entire university. We have a chief diversity officer, our president, and I'm very proud that he stood up and was proactive, and we're working with him, because ultimately we have to make sure that our students feel safe, that they are successful. But it shouldn't just fall on our Black students and Black faculty and staff to make this happen. It's a university-wide initiative, and something that I'm proud of, but there's really nothing to brag about till this is actually taking place. So that's, we're sort of working through this, but we definitely have a president who's leading this from the forefront in a more proactive than reactive manner.
I'll jump in. I very much appreciate your saying that it is not just our Black staff and colleagues' jobs to bring this up, right? That's been something that has been a real cornerstone of not only my office, that obviously I can control, right? But the other offices, is opening up safe spaces with no agenda. Like, I could sit here and I could talk to you about all the cool stuff, because honestly, I identify it as cool, that our president's taking this really seriously. New appointments, kind of bringing this up in a very deliberate manner, and kind of putting his positions where his mouth is, right? There you go. But it's been incredible to just open up these spaces for my staff, for our students, our ambassadors, to just talk openly about what this means to them, to allow them to cry, quite frankly, and to allow them to feel like the burden is not on them to bring it up. Where it's difficult to hold a staff meeting mere minutes after seeing news of having yet another Black person assassinated, right? Then you're going to sit here in a staff meeting and talk about, enrollment goals. It's ridiculous. So we're trying to have deliberate and open forums that I don't lead, okay? That I just allow as an open forum for people to talk about what's going on and to vocalize this and let them know that it's important to us as well. So.
And Northeastern, the conversation has really been happening from all different angles. So whether it be my fantastic team who themselves identified a need for an anti-racist book club within our staff and now came back as small groups and have identified additional training and development opportunities for our team to take part in, up through our senior leadership team, where our president commissioned 4 work streams over the summer to look at a variety of different initiatives that we committed to in June. Probably the most prominent of which for our team will be increasing our representation of Black students to mirror that of the United States by 2025. So needless to say, that has prompted a lot of conversations and creativity and thinking on part of our team, especially in a year where recruitment is going to look different and where we have the opportunity to do things that, you know, maybe based on where we're able to travel or how much we're able to travel or the groups that we're able to connect with or the students that we're able to reach in a variety of different ways would have either been approached differently or have not been possible or as possible. So we're excited to have this opportunity to really dig in and do the work, but certainly recognizing that there's also a lot of work to be done.
Thank you all. Liz brought this up at the end of her comment, but just looking towards the recruitment season that we're looking towards, that we're living it right now, that we're in the thick of it right now. Could each institution speak to changes to the approach of their recruitment efforts this fall, especially being in a mostly nearly entirely remote setting, how we'll continue to reach and support students, especially those kind of most vulnerable populations that might not have direct access to all of our digital outreach as well. And in general, how would you encourage and counsel students to engage with each of your institutions and discover community in a remote setting this fall?
Yeah, so in many ways, anything virtual was an afterthought for us at Tulane. We barely did webinars. This is a pre-COVID world. It was all about come to campus, see us in person, fall in love with our city, fall in love with our people. And in March, when all of this happened, it really forced us to think about bringing Tulane to people in ways that, you know, we really hadn't. And what I've found is that this virtual world has actually opened our doors to a lot more students than we ever would have imagined. And you know, all of my team members, including Jeff, who's my director of admission, we are immersed in virtual, you know, webinars to Q&A with the dean that I host once a month to we started interviews for all our students to give them an opportunity to tell a story beyond the application. And you know, this is a really hard time for students. And I grew up in a country where I didn't have internet. So I didn't have a computer at home. And unfortunately, there are still a lot of students that face those challenges. So something we've done is we've also upped our print outreach so people can actually respond back through forms. And the reality is that it is my hope that this change that we've made stays. The other part of the question was, you know, how the recruitment is working. Everything is virtual, but we are hosting very small tours on campus. We are doing some very small events in certain cities, but I've told our students very clearly that don't feel pressurized to come to campus. Don't feel like you have to go to any of these events. These are there just in case you want to make it. The reality is that we're trying to meet students where they are. And something that really was long overdue has been, you know, the process has been fastened because of COVID. But it's really about meeting students where they are. And I know we'll get to holistic review and test option, all of that, but just in terms of recruitment, it's meeting students where they are and not asking them to jump through hoops at a time when they're already facing way too many anxieties and stressors in life.
think for our team, whereas a typical recruitment cycle at this moment in time would probably have our staff in 40 different states and 40 different countries over the course of the fall. It's certainly an atypical experience to all be completely Boston bound. We made a decision fairly early on in the summer that we would not be doing any fall recruitment travel, which has, to Satya's point, really pushed us in this virtual direction in a way that we never would have imagined. I think what we're thinking about is really this combination of what can we do live that's engaging, recognizing that you and many of your students, along with us, are spending a whole lot of time on Zoom, like right now, and thinking about how we can use this as an opportunity to be creative, to try to test new things, to try to shake the 8 hours of Zoom up a little bit. We're also thinking about the variety of time zones that we need to cover, the different situations that students and families and counselors are in. And with that in mind too, we're also thinking a lot about asynchronous content, that everything can't just be time bound. And we're, I think, very hopeful based on what we saw during yield season with our enrolling students, that the combination of live events where we can engage with you and answer your questions, paired with opportunities where students and families and parents and counselors can work through information at their own pace, is going to be a pretty unique combination that I hope will answer lots of questions. But certainly we're also keeping our ear to the ground to understand what's happening with students and families and counselors and where we can fill gaps. The good news is we're nimble, but this certainly is uncharted territory for all of us.
It's important to us, and my colleagues have done such a great way of expressing it, but just to add a few more things, for students that may not have the most robust internet, it is good to get on-demand information to college counseling so they can see it and use the computers at school. So we've done that. Like Satya mentioned, we have also increase the amount of print that we're doing and making sure that parents get as much as they can to help students in this. We started giving smaller information sessions and tours on June 1. And so I think we're kind of one of the longest. And so coming back to the office, I have to admit, we didn't know exactly what to do, but it's ended up being helpful to us and students that have the opportunity to come and see us, social distancing, all of that. But, Abby came up with a great tour of campus that you can do from your car. So if people happen to be in the area and want to do a tour from their car or through QR codes or on the weekend, walking around. So just trying to serve as many modalities as possible to meet the needs of as many people as we can.
Yeah, I think it's important that point on, we can't assume that the audience will be there when we want them to be there, right? And so, while I think all of us tried to figure out how to make everything virtual over April and probably did 60 plus virtual yield events, we've actually kind of scaled back a little bit and more stuff on demand. So that if you're up at 2 a.m, you can do an info session, right? If you want to download, for us, we're doing it as a podcast of the self-guided tour, right? So that you can do that on your own schedule. At the same time too, just knowing kind of where everyone's at, we're trying to do some fun things, right? So instead of doing a recruitment event, we're gonna do a GW trivia and game night, right? With prospective students, build some school spirit into it. We've partnered with our current students in our journalism program who are doing a podcast series, right? We're really, it's from the admissions office, but the only part of it from the admissions office is that, I pay the server fee, and really they can control that and they get to pick those topics and such. And so, we're trying to find ways to bring a little bit more joy back to this process, because finding your dream college should be fun and should be enjoyable.
You know what, can I just say ditto? It's true. At the end of the day, we're all just pivoting constantly. And as I think almost all of you said, we're just trying to meet our students where they are. Which almost feels silly to keep saying, but it's true. We're just trying to have thoughtful, authentic conversations with people so that they get an idea of what the campus community is like. Because what an interesting group of students that is looking to apply to college right now. I mean, they didn't have a typical junior year, which we all know is that typical year that they find that affinity and they're into it. They go rah, rah, they start buying the hoodies. And then now they're in this odd senior year where they're like, yeah, I bought the hoodie, but I've never been there. But my brother's cousin's second, like it's this crazy world. So, doing things like Instagram Live and just trying to, I don't know, do what the young folk do, while also just making sure that they know. And I know I said this earlier, but like the fact that they couldn't come to campus for that long isn't going to be held against them, right? Like that's something I think they actually need to hear. Like we're not going to hold that against you. So anyway.
And I just have to add, since Ben brought this up, we're talking about serious things, but never in my life had I thought I would have 3 of my staff members host a baking class, a workout class, and a trivia for prospective students. And Jeff Schiffman, who some of you might have met, hosted a workout class where he danced for our students, I guess, is something that I guess the point is, I think all of us are just trying to be as creative as possible and add a little bit of joy where we can in this pretty depressing time. And I really, really admire the zeal of all of our staff members and our team members in trying to find creative ways during a time when it's hard to smile some days.
And just a brief follow-up around the recruitment umbrella, perhaps just briefly just confirming if it's possible for students to, if they wanted to and if it was safe, to go to campus for a self-guided tour, if the campus is open enough to accommodate that.
Yes, we're doing in-person and self-guided, and we have brochures and they can do that using their phone as well.
I'll jump in. Currently self-guided up until October 16th, where we are opening up for the actual information sessions and student-led tours. But you have to register in advance for them because they're going to be itty bitty.
Our visitor center is open in a limited capacity with staff and students available to be able to answer questions and do some one-on-one, very abridged touring with students. But we are really focused on our virtual strategies to be able to engage students, realizing that not everyone can travel nor should travel, especially in the interest of keeping our campus community open and operating.
Yeah, I anticipate our Welcome Center to be closed for the entire fall semester. And thus, if you do want to come to campus and walk the sidewalks, you will be able to download that podcast to explain you through the walking tour. But all of our buildings will be closed unless you have a GWID card.
And as I mentioned, we are open, but buildings are closed. So people know that ahead of time, and we have great things they can preview ahead of time of the things that are closed. And then we do have a limited amount of student ambassadors who are working with us, and they are protected and have microphones so they can social distance and be involved with students.
And if I can just say, sorry, Elena, ditto, same exact thing. Our buildings are closed as well, but they've got the big microphones and yeah.
Excellent, thanks so much. Before shifting topics, I just want to acknowledge that there was a time difference discrepancy. So if we have some new folks joining us at 9, the official program started at 8:30, but we'll be sending a recording of all of it to all registrants. Just a technical glitch to confirm with you all there, but you are just in time if you're signing on right now to hear a little bit more about changes to each of our schools' application and review policies for the year. So a very important topic that is on the forefront of a lot of counselors' minds. We've tried to take stock of a lot of questions in this area that is coming through the Q&A as well. And so when I asked sort of anticipated changes to your evaluation and selection processes, a lot of focus is on the impact of any deferrals from this current incoming class impacting selection and selectivity for fall 2021. A lot around test optional, certainly, and any changes regarding required testing and the impact it may or may not have on scholarship review. Speaking to the COVID-19 prompt, and again, just in general, how we would guide students to address the impact of COVID-19 throughout their application, but in regards especially to that essay. And then finally, training and onboarding for your staff to really help support them to read applications with a very new and different lens of empathy and understanding this year. So I know that was a lot to cover. I can certainly remind everyone of like the sub themes, but those are the 4 big ones we're seeing, at least from tonight, from our counselors.
So I'll jump first because I probably have the highest number of deferrals with our limited operating status. And so I'll leave test optional to you guys since we've been playing that game since 2015. And so instead, on the deferrals, I get the popular question of, does this mean that the class of 2021 is going to have such a harder time? So, we made the announcement that we were going virtual on July 27th. On July 26th, I had 60 kids who had applied for a deferral. I now have 260 kids, which is about 12 to 15% of our entering class. We did not backfill those spots, right? Those spots are just, those spots are empty for this semester. And so therefore, when the high school seniors apply and those deferral kids come back in, they are not competing for the same spots whatsoever. And so I anticipate for most colleges, obviously we're kind of at an extreme end of it, but for most colleges, I don't anticipate deferrals are going to cause challenges for the high school seniors because, if a lot of those deferrals were, caused by hybrid learning, those sort of things and apprehensions over that, it's not like colleges were doing a massive enrollment push in the second week of August and such. And so, each of our colleges is perhaps readjusting budgets as a result. We're going through some staffing changes as a result of our residence halls not making revenue and those sort of things. And, those are hard conversations and such. But in terms of the high school seniors, they will just be competing in the applicant pool of high school seniors out there. And we will happily welcome back our students from the class of 21 or 2020 who deferred. I think, luckily, we aren't, we've been in the test optional environment for a while. And so that hasn't been a thing that we've had to tackle. And it's funny because I've actually done more meetings with colleagues at other schools talking to them about test optional implementation than I have high school visits this September. But what I've been spending time thinking about is really application review about this junior year and senior year, knowing that grading is going to look like all different things, right? And some students have been pass-fail, some students have been letter grades, some students within the same school have gone pass-fail, while other students at that school have gone letter grades. And then, you've also had schools that kind of encourage their students to drop all non-essential classes, as they were shifting to online learning. And, we know as institutions how hard that was. And so therefore it was just as hard, if not harder, for a high school that maybe doesn't have the technological backbone that a research university has. I was thinking back to our previous conversation about testing on campus. And one of the things that we are all very lucky in, that our universities all have the ability to do this ourselves, and we don't have to lean on some outside entity, right? And that, that's similar, that as major research universities, that we can pull off remote learning quite well. But this thought about how do we work with these transcripts, right? Knowing that many students, I think, as Amanda said earlier, they've been told junior year is the year that counts. You've got to really be focused on. And then this complete curveball came through, right? And so I think, as we look at what staff training looks like, one, it's going to be part of the conversations we have in high school visits this fall of really understanding what was going on within your high schools, so that when we get to that profile, we have a clue, we have a key, and we're able to kind of put together both the qualitative stories that you tell us in our meetings with what we're then seeing in the application files, so that we can have that empathy as we go through this application process. At the same time, we still have to make decisions, right? And sometimes there's this desire to make a decision in which no one is harmed. And if you think you're making a decision with which no one is harmed, well, then you're not seeing something, right? And it's really for us to have this 360 view of what we're doing here. and developing some, safety structures in place that we can check ourselves through this process.
Ditto to Ben's comment on deferrals. And I think that's what I've heard on the numerous panels that I've done over the course of the spring and summer is that, yes, our deferrals are up. In our case, it's a little bit more moderated. But we are excited to welcome this year's class, and we're excited to welcome a class of typical size, if not larger, next year. I think specifically thinking about test optional, and as Ben was talking, I realized that in some ways it's almost a misnomer at this point that we have some students who have miraculously been able to test and are pleased with their scores, and great if they want to send them. And then we probably do have some students who maybe were not pleased with their scores in sort of the traditional test optional sense, or didn't get to test in the way that they had planned to or intended to. But then we have this whole other population where it really is just testing not accessible. That watching the news stories locally in Massachusetts going into August and September exams in terms of the percentage of seats that were taken just with early registration, it became very, very, very apparent that this isn't just a strategy meant to give students and universities flexibility, but it really, I think at this point is, kind of a mandate that, there are a lot of students out there that in addition to not wanting to put themselves in a situation that might not feel like the right fit during a pandemic, just absolutely don't have a choice in the matter. So I think I'm going into this year's cycle with, very moderated expectations about what we will see in terms of the share of students taking tests, just purely based on availability and student preference. I think my greater concern, I live in a community personally that's very college bound, college going, and it's concerning to me to see conversations within our school parent groups talking about, how am I going to engage in test prep and how am I going to be able to get a seat for the next exam? I think that anything that we can do collectively to assure students that, like Ben said, our teams are well positioned to understand what is going to be a really nuanced situation for this class, but also for the next two classes after that, because there have been impacts on our first year or freshmen and sophomores in high school as well. So I think that it is taking everything in stride and doing what we can as higher education to try to just slow down the train and understand where students are and the context around them.
So for us, it was a very difficult decision that I made, that we wouldn't be able to defer too many students. And it was a decision based on the fact that we have limited space on campus for housing. And we do require all our students to live on campus. And because we had a hybrid environment and a virtual environment, we only have deferred about 45 students from an incoming class of 1850. So, and we have 100 students taking the Shanghai Tulane program, and the rest of them are here. So it's a difficult decision to make, but we had to make it, even though we want to be flexible. We did award some deferrals based on the fact that there were health concerns, but for the most part, we asked students to make that difficult decision. So therefore, it won't have an impact on next year's incoming class. Echo everything my peers have said. The only thing I will add is in doing a lot of these webinars with students, I found the biggest question to be somehow about test optional. That's the number one question, is they don't believe us that will be test optional. And so the most of the questions I'm getting are you really test optional? I know you say that, but I'm trying to take my test. I'm going to a different city and I'm trying to get, stay with my uncle for a weekend so I can take the test. And I keep reassuring them, I'm trying to reassure our guidance counselors and independent counselors on this call that we really are test optional, which means that not submitting a test score should not impact your ability to get in. That being said, I also am telling students, if you do have a test score that you're comfortable with, don't feel like you cannot send that. And Tulane is a school that offers significant amounts of merit aid. So I've recreated the merit grid, if you will, to award merit scholarships to students, even if they don't send their test scores. So it's important that your students believe and you believe that we are test optional, and I do want to drive that point home. And the only other thing I would say is that a complete revamp in how we are looking at an application and who can succeed academically. The romance reality conversation, right? So the reality is that test scores were used by a lot of us to streamline the application process. And we're gonna have to revisit that. But at the end of the day, we owe this to our students to stand by what we've said, which is that we are test optional, and admit students who we believe can be successful, and we are sort of committed to doing that.
You know, one of the benefits of going like next to last is that I can yet again say ditto, but I mean, really, truly, hopefully what all of you counselors are gleaning from this is that we as the administration at all of these schools are really trying to be flexible, quite frankly, and understand what your students are going through and understand what you as counselors are also encountering in terms of guiding students in a beyond uncertain environment. At just like many of my colleagues here, we are truly test optional, meaning you'll still be qualifying for merit, all of those fun things, should you choose to submit testing. I have noticed, and I'm not just saying this, that some of my, let's say, engineering applicants are like, look, my testing, I did get to do it and it's real good. Like, do you mind that I give it to you? And I'm like, yes, we're not blind to it. Feel free to, but again, optional meaning no advantage nor any disadvantage. Talking a little bit about what we call postponements, so what people will also refer to as deferrals. Ours were also not an astronomically large. We do not anticipate that impacting our incoming class at all. So we're still, I mean, again, we were very lucky to very safely bring our students to campus this fall. Almost over articulate that it was a very safe approach. And again, we're with the hybrid model, we kind of met students where they were, and it's working well.
Okay, so Amanda, you got to say ditto. I want to say ditto too. You guys did a great job of expressing what's going on at SMU as well. Let me just add a few things. We are temporary test optional for spring 2021, fall 2021. We are true, I love that terminology, true test optional. So we are retooling what we're doing in regard to scholarship selection, merit-based scholarships, that type of thing. So all of that will happen. I see a couple of questions that have come through in regard to like interviews. Their interviews are not a part of the landscape at SMU in a formal way. We just kind of call them conversations when students either see us virtually one-on-one, or if they happen to be on campus now, it could be just a very short conversation with an admission officer outside, getting to know them. Have we increased the ability for students to be able to have a one-on-one with us virtually? Yes, definitely. If they can't do that, is it detrimental to them? No, not at all. One thing that I think comes out and everything that my colleagues have said, and I totally agree, is that students will never be penalized for things that are out of their control. When it comes to retraining of the admission team on what we're doing and how we're doing it, I say that's one of the most important things that we're doing right now, because context matters. It truly does matter to dig down deep and really see what students are putting out there for you to read and see. I've also spent some time working with faculty members, talking to them about their recommendations and how those might look different to universities and what they could add to those recommendations to help round out what we know about a student. So yeah, we're all very supportive in that regard, and we'll work with everything that you give us.
I just want to jump in on the backside, because one of the things I thought about as I was hearing people talk, we luckily, we just graduated our first test optional class. So I've actually seen the graduation rates and I've seen their performance. And I just want to kind of say out loud that, with care and thought, we can make these decisions in a way that the students who are admitted to our institutions will be in a great place to succeed. And I think that's the thing, you know, we had a hypothesis as we went into our test optional environment back in 2015, and how it's came true for our campus 4 or 5 years later. And we're truly seeing those outcome measures, right? Because a lot of times we talk about test optional as an admission strategy, but it's really a full-blown educational strategy. And I just, you know, a word to counselors, but also to my peers that, you know, there's always going to be a little bit of second guessing as you start making these committee decisions, but you're going to be able to do this in a way that makes the right choices for students.
Excellent. Just some brief follow-up questions that were important coming through the Q&A regarding the testing policies and again, guidance and addressing some inequities kind of inherent still in some of the, again, I guess, existing policies. For students, how would you best counsel students then regarding when to apply and when to submit scores, especially with like our early rounds? If they did have the opportunity to test later, are institutions receiving scores after deadlines, just any sort of feedback or guidance on that end? We'll start there.
I'm asking Amanda to start this time.
As you could tell, I was like waiting. I was like, maybe Satya will answer first. How dare you? Sure. So, all right. So let's immediately address the deadline thing, right? So the whole point of all of this, at least for right now, and I hate to be this blunt, is our going test optional for fall of 2021 was a direct result of the global pandemic, by and large, right? This is something that I think a lot of us as professionals were very excited about. So in regards to the deadline, right now, if you do not have your tests in hand at the time of the deadline, the guarantee isn't there, right? In terms of the fact that we'd be able to use it. I mean, that's the reality. To really speak to, though, the students that are kind of weighing whether to submit or not, I mean, isn't that kind of the golden egg of questions right now? I know I kind of look to my incredible counseling partners and how are they counseling? And I know that by and large, you're sitting down with your student and you're pulling up that school profile and you're saying, okay, so here's the testing range of XYB school. Wow, XYB school, aren't they neat? Okay, so here's the profile. Where do you fall, Jimmy? Jimmy, you look like you fall fairly substantially below their testing profile. Jimmy, you're a pretty neat kid. You do a lot of other great stuff. Maybe testing isn't the thing that we want to showcase, okay? So it's having those conversations that I understand are not only nuanced, but new in a lot of cases. And it absolutely is fairly panic inducing. Just know, at least on my end, and because of course I can only really speak for UM right now, is that we are completely adjusting the entire holistic model to address the fact that students will not have testing. So should you say, do not consider my testing, we're not considering your testing. We're looking at everything else. And the full holistic model is changing, including scholarships and so on and so forth. So I hope I did a good job, Satya.
I think in terms of the timing question, I was looking, there was also another question in the chat that I found intriguing about acceptance rates and will ours be higher or lower than last year? And goodness, if someone else on the call has a sense of what their applicant pool is going to be and their acceptance rate, by all means, I'd love your model, send it my way. Because this is a black box. You know, we're operating based off of unprecedented circumstances that don't look like anything else. And with that in mind, I think, you know, I would lean on advice that I give in a variety of different situations to prospective students and their parents, which is that students need to make a decision about what they feel comfortable with and how they can submit an application that lets them sleep at night. And if having feedback and information on that application early, and if they are pleased with their high school transcript and their involvement and their essay and their recommendations, then by all means, we would love to see your application on November 1st through early action or through early decision as well. If a student, you know, feels really, really strongly that until they have the first semester of senior year under their belt, or if they somehow have secured a later test date and they feel like they need that for their application, ultimately I can't put myself in that student's shoes. But again, I think that based on what we're seeing across the national landscape, but especially I'll say from my own vantage point in my own backyard, I think that we are going to see such a large share of this year's seniors that have no choice but to not have testing, or to have testing that was early and limited and not something that feels fully representative of them, that I would be basing that decision, if I were a student, much more strongly on when I could put my best foot forward based on the things that are within my control, as opposed to rolling the dice and having to wait longer for a decision to be able to see where regular decision or early decision 2 lands. That would be my personal take.
Yeah, and thank you both, Liz and Amanda. I have talked to a lot of people and I've told them, if you're the type of person that wants control and does not like uncertainty, this is going to be a very difficult admissions cycle for all of you, including people that, in my roles. Because the reality is that all of us are doing the best we can to answer, plan, and create policies based on information that we have today. And the world, again, 30 days from now could be different, but you need an answer today. And so that's what we're trying to do, is give you answers based on what we see in the landscape right now. And I agree with my colleagues. The only thing I would add that is specific in terms of some of the questions that I've seen is that what can guidance counselors do, right? And I think that guidance counselor recommendation that you write, I think making sure that if there's something that we can glean from the application that you want to tell us, that would be a really good place to do that. And in terms of the COVID question, I've been saying this, and I know my colleagues have too, unless COVID has impacted you atypically, don't have to tell us that COVID has impacted you. I mean, I think it has impacted all of us. We realize that. I'm not trying to be a smart ass here. I'm just telling you that use those places and those choices wisely. And if COVID has really turned your life upside down more so than someone else, tell us. But we already know that, and we're looking at this from that lens. There's some questions about extracurriculars. Folks, just know that at this point, we realize that students don't have the luxury of going and doing extracurricular activities. I know so many students who are actually working jobs because their parents have lost jobs. So we're taking all of that into consideration, and the human side of admissions hopefully is going to come out. And my president understands that. I think all our leadership understands that you cannot have a typical admissions year. So the expectations are different. Acceptance rates, ED rates, all of those questions here, I wish I could answer. I just don't think we can, because our applicant pool isn't created yet. And I think we're just trying to sort of answer what we can based on what we see. So I'm just being sort of candid about that.
What I'll add is, what we would like to do is to help you as much as we can, because I see where someone said kids are test panicked, and we already knew before the pandemic that anxiety with students was rising. I remember every panel, I'm sure, that we were all on, that we always at least had a portion of it. We talked about everything's going to be okay. We'll work it out. And so just know that the way we feel now and the way we're operating is 100 times that it will work out. I do think it's important for us as admission officers who have parent communication flows to really be deliberate in telling them that message to support you. So don't hesitate to let us know what you need from us.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. I just want to acknowledge, in the interest of time, we're at the hour mark from when we started. So I also want to acknowledge there's a number of excellent questions still coming in from our counselors, those that joined at the halfway point, certainly. So what we'll try to do as a follow-up from today is to get a record of the Q&A and respond in writing to gather information from all of our institutions to give you the most comprehensive response as possible. So I know your questions about ED and EA and resources for scheduling visits moving forward, we'll get as much information to you as possible after today. But I do want to give the last word to our presenters. If you would just share, again, just one last words of encouragement, words of advice for our counseling colleagues, perhaps, or where you see this leading in the future, right? The lasting impact beyond this year. Any last takeaways to share to close out our conversation?
I'll start. I mean, so I think the thing, for everyone to keep in mind is that the members of the admissions committees have also been having a rough 6 months. And what I mean by that in terms of, just like high school students haven't been involved in their clubs and their activities and their athletics and such, our lives have been upside down. And I think all of us have a little bit reinvented our life. I was joking, with the panelists before we started about just the things that I've learned and taught myself during this time. Like, I've consumed half of the instructional videos on YouTube, right? I redid my basement floor. I couldn't nail something before this thing started, right? And so I think that many of your students have gone through similar journeys because their brains are still active, right? They want to engage, they want to learn things, and they've probably been diving down different corners of Wikipedia. They've probably been learning skills. They've probably been learning languages on Duolingo, who knows? And for them not to be, ashamed to share those things on their application. Because again, some of those things that would be there in a normal year just won't be there. And for them to kind of not be afraid about talking about some of those individual pursuits and those individual hobbies that aren't part of an organized thing, right? And I think that's a unique opportunity of this time because it's gonna allow students just to show off that this is who I am, and given a blank slate, this is what I chose to just think about getting involved with, and this is where my passions left. Like, I started learning Japanese, I quit, right? But I was intrigued for a bit, right? Like, don't be afraid of those things, even though they're very, very different than what they would normally be presenting to us in the admissions process.
Ben, I tried to make beer in a 780 square foot apartment, so we all make mistakes. It's fine. What I will just say from my little words of encouragement is sincerely thank you, counselors. We could not do this without you. Your students couldn't do this without you. We hope this was a semblance of grace and appreciation for all that you've done in terms of pivoting. We just very much appreciate you. Thanks.
My add to it is I think that we are dealing with lots of unknowns. There's some great things that have come out of these last 6 months. And I think especially in our educational community, that so many schools have gone, whether it be temporary, pilot, but test optional. I mean, I used to work at a school that was fully test optional and now will be temporary at SMU. But I do think that coming to the forefront is very helpful for us. I also think that the virtual world, to a certain extent, of reaching out to students that we've never seen before, who couldn't get to our campuses, that's been great as well. And so what I wish for you is a great, great semester and a great year, and also that balance of knowing that you are doing a great job, and we're here for you.
I am the parent of an incoming kindergartner this year, and on every single occasion that I have been tempted to email the principal or his teacher and ask, but when is school starting? And what supplies does he need at home? And what are the different apps we're going to need to download? I have reminded myself that every time that I get one of those emails from one of our enrolling students, that while I'm always happy to answer it, that I also have 18,000 of them that all have the same question. I hope that the students and parents in your lives are giving you that same level of grace. I also hope that our partnership between higher ed and secondary schools can be as strong as ever this year, because I think we're really going to need each other. I think that it's apparent as we are all trying to figure this out simultaneously, that if you see something that's working, or if you see something that we could be doing differently or better that we haven't considered, that we're trying to navigate this just as you are, and are really open to new ideas or tweaks that we can make that would make things more helpful for you and your students. I hope that tonight has been an example of that, and thank you for joining us, but we're all working through this together, and I look forward to the partnership this year.
Yeah, so first I did want to apologize. Someone said I used the word guidance counselor. I apologize. It's I was told it's not appropriate anymore, so I'm sorry for that. But I will say my last words are something my dad used to say, which is the morning is brightest after the darkest night. And I really believe we're going through a very, very dark phase. But when this is over, because it will be over, I think college admissions will be different. And some of the things that we're doing now will stay, because they'll be forced to stay. Because people will say, wait, why are you changing this again? And I think a lot of us will have to make some decisions that we should have made anyways because of COVID. So just hang in there, folks. Just realize that we're all human beings at the end of the day, make mistakes. But thank you all for joining us. Apologies again for the technical glitches at the beginning, but that allowed us as panelists to get to know each other better. That was the only silver lining. And thank you all for joining us this evening. It's been a real pleasure being able to join my esteemed colleagues and answer some questions.
Excellent. Thank you all again. Again, thank you to our counselors for tuning in. We'll send more information as a follow-up, but enjoy the rest of your evening as much as you can. And thank you so much to our presenters. You guys are fantastic. And again, your transparency and insight and authenticity and just genuine care for students and the counseling community was so clear. And we really appreciate everything that you shared tonight. So thank you all. Have a good evening.